In keeping with our focus on the future, this afternoon we're extremely lucky to be joined by 5 incredible young Australians who each hold a unique position in Australian pop culture. It's my pleasure to facilitate this discussion. Yes, my first for the day. I'd like to introduce you to our guests, and perhaps they can walk on as I call out their names. Rudy Jean Rigg, whose pronouns are they, them. Rudy's an autistic and non-binary transgender host, creator, advocate, educator and pop culture fiend, who's also been the ABC Queer respondent recently for Sydney World Pride. Go Rudy. Zoe Tarakis, whose pronouns are they, he, actor, activist, absolute superstar. Come on, folks, giddy up. We also have Brooke Blurton, whose pronouns are she, her. She's a Noongar Yumatji woman and first bisexual bachelorette and many other things too. Tilly Lawless, pronouns she, her, who's a queer Sydney-based sex worker and amazing writer. And Imbi, pronouns he, they, trans-masc, non-binary, everything artist and practicing mystic. Ooh. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honoured to be in your company. This is pretty special. So today we're talking about LGBTQIA+ representation in pop culture and film and TV. Before we talk, I'd like to acknowledge that we're here on the land of the beautiful Gadigal people and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. As I said, I'm stoked to be sitting alongside such smart, savvy, hot, queer panellists, envies galore as well, might I say. Clearly, we have greater queer visibility in pop culture now than we did, say, 40, 50 years ago. When I was growing up and discovering who I was, I think we had K.D. Lang and Melissa Etheridge, and as inspirational as they are, they didn't help me realise I was a raging queer. That happened much later, I think when the L Word was on TV, and there were other role models later on in life. I'd like to ask you folks, who are your queer pop culture, role models growing up, if any at all? Rudy, I might start with you.
I think I'm the worst person to start with because I don't actually think that I had a role model.
Okay.
I think I saw myself in a lot of different people, but not singularly in someone in one TV show, Yeah.
Okay, well that says something.
Yeah.
How about you, Zoe?
Unfortunately, ditto. Right. Eric in The Little Mermaid, I was like, oh, I want to be him. And then, with hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's why I love George Michael so much. But, so now I say George Michael, but at the time I was like, hey, why do I love this guy?
So it sort of makes sense now.
With hindsight, but again, didn't really have that many.
Yeah. Tilly?
I think there were definitely people I wanted to fuck, but no one I wanted to be,
Yeah.
Eric in The Little Mermaid.
Can you name some of those?
Sorry?
Can you name anyone?
That's private. Afterwards.
Cool. Brooke?
I sit with these two as well. I mean, I didn't really have that many role models to, especially that were openly queer and also First Nations. I mean, I think later on they came. I mean, I loved, That's So Raven before she was even queer, when before she'd come out. But then, in my early 20s, when I sort of really settled into my sexuality, was Narelda Jacobs.
Oh, wow.
And I had the biggest crush on her, but now she's a sister girl, so I'm like, damn.
Oh, that's so cool. Imbi, what about you?
I've always just been big on cartoons, so again, the people that I wanted to be weren't exactly realistic or anything like that, but they were also probably more people I wanted to fuck and less people that I idolized, like Kim Possible.
Oh my God, yes.
Stunning. Yeah, I could go on, but I won't for the sake of time.
Yeah. I think, I know many queer folks on our journeys of discovering who we are, you go through that transition of wanting to be with them or wanting to be them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very confusing.
Yeah, I feel like the lines are quite blurred there, right?
Yeah.
There's quite a few people that, I feel like I've only recently realized that there are people that I thought I was infatuated with for a very long time, that only now I realized I actually wanted to be them, and that was through a process of gender becoming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think also, I don't know about all of you guys, but I think that sometimes you're looking, when you're more isolated as a young queer person, I grew up in a regional area, so I was really looking for people I wanted to be with and be like, but the more that you find community, the less you're seeking that out in media because you're surrounded by the people, you know? Yeah.
How much has representation shifted over time? Like, when did you start to see people like yourselves in pop culture? If you'd like to take a stab at that one.
All too recently.
Yeah.
Yep. I
Like-
mean, you're also pioneers here as well.
Yeah, I mean, in Australia, like, I feel very much a part of it. Like, I remember when I auditioned for Wentworth, they were still very much considering cis people for that role.
Really?
You know, and like, it really started, I mean, sort of loosely started with Morgan Davies in the end. He was like, that was like one of the first times Australia had been like, hey, maybe trans people should do this,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And then it kind of now has become unacceptable. But that was, I did Wentworth 3 years ago.
Yep.
So that's pretty spooky recent if you think about it, you know, like
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, America's always been somewhat in certain aspects a little bit ahead of us in like, you know, in our industry.
Yep.
And they've been doing it a little bit longer, but again, like only since 2015, really.
Yeah.
You know, like it's fucking recent.
And what was it like for you getting to portray a trans character on screen for the first time?
Daunting.
Really?
Like amazing, but also like you just feel the weight of a community behind you that you care so deeply about. And then a room full of cis people being like, so would a trans person do this?
Yeah.
Would a you know, and you're like, fuck man, I don't know, I'm only one of them, you know, like,
I feel you.
like speaking for a whole community is impossible. So I just did what I do and what I know as a living, breathing trans person I live, and I'm like, well, you can't tell me it's wrong, you know, because it's my everyday. But yeah, it was incredible and such a privilege, and also spooky as hell.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow, well, congratulations for being such a pioneer. Brooke, a lot of people know you as being, you know, the first bisexual bachelorette, which is just kind of wild, like a bisexual on TV in
I
a
know,
reality
it's
show. Oh my
strange.
gosh. Well, what was that whole experience like?
I mean, personally, I probably more identify with pansexual, and I wrote that in Big Loves, you know, and I kind of used a book to sort of reclaim all this back.
Yep.
So, but being the first ever First Nations and first ever bisexual bachelorette, I mean, there was that weight. Like, there's no denying that there was such a weight to it. Like, I was like, what if I stuff up? Like, you know, I'm going to be an embarrassment, like, to my communities that I represent. But then I was like, no, this is actually not even for me. This is, like, for the future generations, and this is nothing to do... Like, as much as I'm carrying this out and I'm doing it, I actually felt very... You know, I put things in place that I could feel like I could be myself. So, like, you know, culturally, like, I felt like I had people who created a cultural safe place for me and like allowed me to just be me and fall in love. That didn't happen, but we won't talk about that. Spoiler. You know, I fell in love with the fact that I was able to represent those so openly, and like being the first bisexual bachelorette. I mean, it is a little bit disappointing at times when you think, okay, you know, my nephew's 5 years old, and when we think about it, 5 years old was when the marriage equality bill was passed, and like we can now, and he'll grow up in a world where he won't even think that that wasn't a thing now. You know, he's 5 years old and he's like, oh, like, and that for me was like how I wanted future generations to be like, is to know and just grow up a part of being accepting and knowing that like no one is different, like we're all like. And so doing the season and doing the first ever bisexual bachelorette it was hard, but I know that these things need to happen in these mainstream shows, and Australian media hasn't really shown a lot of positive, I guess, hasn't shown the First Nations always in a very positive light, and also, you know, sort of overrepresent as well in some areas.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, I
often-
hope that answered the question.
And intersectional queer identities
Exactly.
seem to blow people's minds. as
Oh,
well.
it's insane how, like, it's such a... I mean, I was really used to it. I was always like, Brooke's big bombshell and Brooke you know, I was so used to it. But, like, you know, for me, I've been able to